always been the most inspired by were the ones that I felt were the most honest, and you can't be honest without being vulnerable. It's
Mm.
like if you tell the truth about, it's like the only reason that poem, I almost come to tears every time I read it, and it's because like it captured a moment that was so true. It's like it was a moment that I found out that even in prison I could be free, and freedom is so valuable to me.
Welcome to Vulnerability Muscle, the empowering podcast challenging norms and guiding you to find strength and power through vulnerability. I'm your host, Reggie D. Ford. In a world that often portrays vulnerability as a sign of weakness, I believe it is a source of tremendous strength and authenticity. Through insightful conversations and thought provoking interviews, Vulnerability Muscle aims to redefine vulnerability and help listeners develop a new perspective on their own lives. Each episode of Vulnerability Muscle delves into a variety of topics such as mental health, social issues, and mindset shifts. We explore the power of vulnerability in healing, building resilience, and promoting personal growth, as well as fostering meaningful connections. This podcast provides practical tools and strategies to navigate life's challenges, overcome adversity, and create more inclusive and just environments for all people. The guest on this episode is Omari Booker, a visual artist based in Los Angeles, California, and Nashville, Tennessee. Omari has a very interesting background. He studied mathematics in school before switching over to studio art and graphic design. He creates these large scale, like mural type artworks, paintings, and large canvases. And this is something I found on Omari's website. Omari takes a process oriented approach to his art, embracing it as a therapeutic modality through which he is able to express his passion for the freedom and independence that the creativity process gives him to experience. His art is his personal therapy, and his desire is that those viewing it will have a personal experience of catharsis. The philosophy that undergirds Omari's work is freedom through art, and he aspires to create work that communicates to his audience their unique and intrinsic ability to be free. This conversation is so amazing. We talk about his background. We talk about what it's like to be one of the only students of color, a Black student at a private school, and the challenges that come with that. He discloses to us his diagnosis with bipolar disorder and what that has meant for his life. And there's a prison sentence there that he talks about as well that led to the inspiration for one of his most recent art shows, which he titled 15, which was the number of years that he was sentenced to with that charge. So much greatness, so much insight that he shares. And so, with no further ado, let's embrace vulnerability with Omari Booker. Omari Booker, what's up, my man?
And not too much. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you, bro. I'm glad to have you for real. This is a special moment because I think we have vulnerable conversations whenever we link up. And I think that's something that really drew me to you. It's just like, I don't think even in the brief time that we've known each other, we've had much small talk. It's just like, let's talk about real stuff. And I'm excited to let the world hear that.
Absolutely. Same. I feel the same way.
Definitely, man. So take me back because this is a lot that I know about you, but then there's also stuff that I just don't. So tell me about. I want to start with like your parents and their influence on your life. What influence did your mom, your dad, any other people, any other guardians had on your life growing up?
Yeah, my parents were huge influences and still are. Yeah, my mom is from Trinidad, so kind of coming from a Caribbean background, but also an immigrant background where she wasn't born in the United States. She came kind of mid high school. She was about 15 years old. My grandmother came over from Trinidad, and so they kind of started off in the United States with just kind of a challenging road ahead of them, just as all immigrants and a lot of people that are born here as well. But yeah, they kind of came in with that mentality of education, figure out the next step, and try to make things better for the generations that would come, which are me and my sister and my cousins and this whole group of people that kind of started from that line of my grandmother making that trip to the United States, by herself. She was a single parent,
Wow,
and
wow.
yeah, came to the U.S. and that was sort of how I was Yeah, I think kind of just introduced to like adversity and pushing through, and also just the importance of relationships, love, like what really makes you you. And neither one of my parents really came from a lot of stuff. You know, my dad grew up in Franklin. You know, the generations before were kind of Columbia, Thompson Station.
In
So
Tennessee?
yeah,
Okay.
in Tennessee. So dad's from Tennessee. He was one of 12, so a lot of
Wow.
kids. And so there really wasn't a. I think like I never really viewed like success as having a lot of things. It was like having people that you cared about that could depend on you, that you could depend on, and then all the other stuff sort of took care of itself. And then also I think I had the the benefit of being taken care of too. So it's like I think it's easier to not be super materialistic when your immediate needs have always been met, you
That's
know.
beautiful. Hell
And
yeah. No, that's
so
beautiful.
yeah, and so it's a little bit of balance of both.
Yeah, you had both of your parents in your life throughout your entire childhood and all of that?
Yeah, from birth to now. I mean, they were married for 35 years. They got
Wow.
divorced. Got divorced into. Oh, but I was in my 30s by the time they got
Okay.
divorced. Yeah.
Let me talk about that because I guess I didn't know many married people in my life growing up, but what I did have was my grandparents who were the most solid and consistent source of love and nurturing in my life. And then when I was turning, I think 18, like going into college, they
Hmm.
separated, they weren't married, but they split ways and broke up. I'm like, whose grandparents break up? But it was a matter of, misunderstanding. It was a matter of, financial differences and things like that. But it had a huge impact on me that I really because I was torn. I loved them both. I loved them as that unit. And then I had to start choosing. Was
Hmm.
there any of that or any feelings that came up with you, even though you were 30 when that happened?
Oh, for sure. I think it came up more because I was 30.
Yeah.
Because it's like by this time, like I'm a man. You know,
Hmm.
it's like I'm not like
Yeah.
kind of. It's not like when your parents split and you're 12 or 13 or 14 or whatever. It's like your parents split and you're old enough to protect your mom. Like you're old enough
Mhm.
to have the energy of, hey, I don't care if you're my dad or not. Like this is still a woman in my life that means a lot. So I mean, I think there was definitely that rub, especially for the first few years until like I think until my mom forgave my dad a little bit, then I was able to let some of that
Mhm.
go, and then me and him have a better relationship now than we did in that gap. But I mean, still, from birth to the foundation that was already there from my whole life, it's like I never was upset with him about the way that he interacted with me, but I definitely just like I think with I would with any with any person that I loved, if they were if they were hurt by someone else, then I would kind of take that sort of personally, and
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
that caused that definitely caused some some strife, and it wasn't even like strife between me and him because I mean he understood, he kind of got it, and I think as I get older and I've got a son, I have a 19-year-old son, so it's like
Mhm.
I have a better understanding of how he might feel in relationship to his mom and his relationship towards me, where it's like yeah, there's just some of those giving people a little more space and a little more understanding of you're not exempt from the same mistakes that I make. Just because you were an adult or my parent or whatever, like you went through the same things, the same challenges, and move through it as best you could. And I love you for what you tried. I love you for all that you did and all that you tried to do. you know.
I think that's so important to be able to recognize, like even as children or young people, young adults, recognizing that our parents have had a history, have had a background, have had a story that helped shape them to then shape how their parenting style was and how they, what mistakes or what decisions they made in their lives. That's something that's really helped me in understanding my parents a lot better. And I like take this weight that I had of like I guess almost blaming them for the way that they parented or the way that our relationships have come to be. And just looking at it like, no, like you said, they did the best they could with what they knew. And unfortunately, for some, they might not have had many resources or much knowledge around what nurture, what love, what, not to saying that that's the case in your situation, but that was the case in mine. But I think that understanding of her life is a perspective that is need to be honored as well.
For sure. Yeah. And that is kind of what I sort of spun back with it, even with my just with my dad and with Mel, just I mean a black man growing up in the South in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s,
Yeah.
it's like what yeah, where what space would I really even have for
Right.
tenderness? It's like shit, we're trying to make it. We're just
Seriously, like, we talking about embracing vulnerability, and that's not a thing that they would do, right? It's like,
no.
I gotta be the man. I gotta be a provider.
Yeah, and it was coming out of necessity. It's like because of what had happened before and to them and what is still happening like that. That's why these conversations are relatively new and it could only I don't think that these conversations could happen without them treating their generation the way that they did. It's like there's a lot of grace that even allows me to explore stuff that they would have been like, "What? Huh? You got time for that?" you know?
I think about that all the time, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they paved the way, and they may have not known what was on the other side of that bush that they were whacking, but they opened the doors for these conversations to sit down and think about and talk about mental health, which a lot of times people didn't have that luxury to sit down. I heard something that was like, naps and rest for Black people is radical, it's revolutionary, because that it wasn't always the luxury that we had, and so
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely so. When you so you had that family structure growing up, and you had your sibling, your sister.
Yes.
What was kind of the education side of that all? What did you grow up in public school, private school? What was that?
Yeah. For my first until 8th grade, I went to both. So I went to a number of public schools, a handful of private schools, some like Christian, like church-based schools. So I went to. My mom was a teacher. Yeah, I did grow up. Yeah, but that's not really the wasn't the reason for going to those schools. It was that my mom she was in education. Her major in college was English. She taught for a few years, and then coming to the South from when she came from Trinidad, she went to Boston. Went from Boston after her and my dad. After about 3 years of them kind of bouncing around, they came to um, Tennessee. So they met in college, came to Tennessee. That's where my dad's whole side is
Gotcha.
from. And so I think after seeing how black people, black boys specifically, were treated in the school system in Nashville, she was just searching for like what was the best option out of a lot of really bad options. and
Mm,
so she went through all
wow,
of them. She went
wow.
through like you know, public schools. I mean, she went through Ensworth as an elementary school, then we went to Stokes, and I went to JT Moore, which Moore was a pretty good experience. Like there was,
As a public
and
school.
as a public school, and so by the time I got to 8th grade, I'd been to like seven schools or
Wow.
so, and
Yeah.
none of them were because of my discipline or anything like that. They were all just being pulled out of schools
Yeah.
because they weren't treating me like a human being. Basically, like that was kind of my mom's whole thing. Was like, you're not going to treat my son like a second class citizen.
What type of treatment would you what first, give me context around what year this might have been, and then what type of treatment do you remember? Can you recall?
Yeah, this would have been 80s into early 90s. So yeah, like 92, I turned 12. So a lot of these years would have been like the late 80s. And I think it was just kind of, at least in the schools that are predominantly white, being either kind of consistently like the object of like the focal point in some negative way. and
Mhm.
and even if it was like we're gonna give a gold star for being good today, and it was always like some sort of treatment that was very outside of what the other kids were experiencing,
Gotcha.
um, and whether it was like someone might lash out and I retaliate, and I would either, and it wasn't even that we both wouldn't get in trouble, but it was just the rhetoric that the school would give of like
Right.
Omari is being aggressive towards this
Yeah.
kid or
How it's
whatever, and it's
framed.
how it's framed when I was probably the most passive of all the kids. Like
Yeah.
anybody that knows me today knows I'm kind of similar to like that's how I was as a kid. It's like I was definitely never like just lashing out at anybody. But I also had a pretty strong sense of justice and what was right and wrong. And I mean, I think a lot of that came from my parents, and I
Yeah.
mean, especially my mom. And yeah, she would say it very plainly. Like she went into Ensworth as an elementary student and said, "Where I come from, we're not second class citizens." And
Mm.
if my son at 5 years old is coming to the car saying I'm not as good as these white boys, he's not coming back. And that
Wow.
was the last day. I didn't go back to that.
Wow.
I didn't go back to school ever again. When
Wow.
and it's not even like a specific indictment of, and of course I said a school's name. I'm not making it
You're right.
about
It's not
that
about any
school.
individual school, no.
It's about the culture of the city, the state, the country,
The
and it's
country,
not about the
yeah.
80s. It's
Right.
about right now. Like
Yeah.
that is the and I think kind of growing up with that gave me a completely a kind of unique sense of self that I don't think I could have had without someone kind of stepping in and being like, "No, I don't care. Like, I don't really care what you say around here. This person means something,
That's
and
huge.
if you don't treat him like he means something, he's not going to be back." And so now when I'm going into business dealings or art galleries or whatever, I've got that same energy of like, you're going to treat me like I'm something or I'm out.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
so
that's it.
huge to have somebody
Yeah.
to advocate for you. And were you present during those conversations when your mom would go to the school and be like, "Absolutely not. This is not the treatment we get."
Sometimes I sometimes I was, and it's funny because as a kid you hate it. As a kid, you're like, oh gosh, here she goes, you know. And because she had the same standards for me, so it's like I also like kind of hated that. I tell her now all the time. It's like when I was a kid, I'd say, yeah, but everybody does this, and she'd say, but you're not everybody. And as a kid, I would hate it, and as an adult, it's like the other side of that is like you're kind of holding me up as somebody special. You're not everybody. Like you don't have to take the bullshit that XYZ takes because you're not them. You know, so you can hate it, but it's also I think as an adult, I really appreciate that. You know, yeah, what that kind of like built up inside me to the point that I went through some really kind of challenging and demeaning times, but never felt like I was that my person was a reflection of my circumstances.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah.
And when you talk about the challenging times, what were they continued through that through the education? So after 8th grade, where did you end up, and what were there still challenging times during that, or had things kind of calmed down?
For sure. And I went to MBA. You know, we share the same
Yeah.
high school alma mater.
Oh yeah. Oh
So yeah,
yeah.
we're both Big Red alums. And
Big Red. And that's the one
so
thing I wanted to point out too is I write about MBA, Montgomery Bell Academy in my book. And in the intro of my book, I say like nothing that I say is an indictment on anyone or any institution. It's more of a look at and a commentary on the social atmosphere that we're in and the things that have impacted the way that our society operates. And so
for sure.
I'm glad that you mentioned that as you named a couple schools and things like that. But NBA in the what early mid '90s?
Yeah, early 90s, mid 90s. Yeah, so super challenging. Super challenging. And I mean, I think that's, you know, part of our kinship. Like my first introduction to you really was taking a look at the speech that you had given to the faculty at MBA. And I was literally brought to tears, like brought
Mm.
to tears because like the same place that I experienced all those things, someone that really represented the things that we all wanted to say,
Yeah,
but probably never really had a full chance to say. And many didn't go back. Like many black kids just never went back
and
because they were
still
like,
won't.
yeah. And I think it was a really kind of healing moment to to see those things expressed,
Mm.
see those things expressed, and it made it. Yeah, I mean, it was incredibly moving. I know that that's one of those. I don't know if that's is still online. I know some that's not as easy to
No.
find as it used to be,
Right, right.
but it's an important piece of I mean it's an important piece of Nashville history because
Wow.
any place is going to the highest institutions of any community are gonna be they're gonna set the pace, you
Mhm.
know. So I mean if you know, the in Boston or wherever, whether it's like the Harvard or the Yale or
Right.
The Vanderbilt for Nashville, the MBA for Nashville. And those are both institutions that you went through and
Yeah.
graduated from,
Yeah.
which are the places that are going to say like this is the standard.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think to really like be elite institutions, you've got to share that other side of it because that's the
Mhm.
only way that you're going to separate yourself.
Yeah. I think that's
Because
so true.
especially right now, is to go ahead and say like this is where we really, really like failed some people that came through
Mm.
here, and this is what we're going to do about it to make it different. You know?
Wow, wow. I hadn't, I this you're referring to a speech I gave a couple years ago to the high school that we both went to, and it was for in service, and I was told to come in and talk about my experience and to inspire the teachers and the staff, and I took that as an opportunity to do exactly what you said, like speak up for the voices that, we all wanted to say this at some point. We all have similar experiences as it related to being black at a predominantly white school, or just coming from a different environment, even if you weren't black. If you were a part of the LGBTQ, if you were gay at that school, it was a challenge. If you were Asian at that school, it was a challenge. If you had a learning
Yeah,
disability, it was a challenge. And so
yeah.
I got up there and I
If you were
spoke.
poor and white, it was a
Man,
challenge.
yeah, if you were
So,
poor, yeah, if you were poor and
yeah,
white, it was a
yeah.
challenge. And so, like, I had some folks coming from like Fairview and Bellevue, and coming in and saying like, man, this is hard because they didn't fit the Bell Mead model, the Bell Mead
Yeah,
mold. And so, and I was intentional about, and I probably could have delivered it a little differently, but I was nervous. Because I was talking to folks that taught me and led me for many years, and this was the first time a lot of them had heard me speak. Because when I was
yeah,
going through school, I was mute. Like I was shy. I didn't really want to talk about much. And to hear those words coming out of my mouth, despite the success that I had, academically, athletically, I was a star student while I was there. And
yeah,
so I think many people made this assumption that I didn't have those challenges,
yeah.
and but I made a point to emphasize that this is not just indicative of this school, but if you search, black at any private school, you're going to
Hmm.
see similar things. And I think 2020 really brought that up. You saw people having this voice and using that voice to express some of the things that they had been through. What so were you I'm guessing back then there weren't many black students in your class. How many students of color or black students did you have in your class?
Yeah, my graduating class there was two. It was so
Okay.
me and Charles Davidson. So so yeah,
Wow.
my
Woof.
homie that went and he went to Morehouse and kind of did some intentional correcting
Yeah.
of his high school experience. And, but yeah, but we started with about four, maybe 4 or 5 in the 8th grade.
Okay.
But by senior year, there was just me and Charles, and yeah, I think that it was, it's challenging when something has been done a certain way for long enough and it's been praised for the
Hmm.
way that it's been done for long enough that there really isn't any impetus to change it. you
Yes.
know and so I think like there's a if you got through as a black student, usually you kind of, you kept your head down, you did your work, you excelled pretty extraordinarily in like athletics and the classroom,
Hmm.
given what your cultural background is, because it's not like it's being taught from a lens that you're comfortable with. Where if you're coming out of a predominantly white and historically white community,
Yeah.
then the lens of everything you're being taught is coming from that. So
Yeah.
it's like this bookshelf where there's Ta-Nehisi Coates and James Baldwin. It's like if I was in a school where everything that I was being taught and the plays and etc.,
Yep.
then of course you can excel a different way because
Yep.
it's all in your language.
Right.
Whereas as black kids, you're kind of, for one, you're sort of speaking the foreign language and excelling at learning the foreign language of white supremacy. Like you gotta
Yeah.
figure out how to speak that.
Yeah.
But you also don't want to be so disconnected from your community that you gotta speak your language too, because we all gotta
Mhm.
go,
Ooh.
whether it's home to our physical home or just home to, for me it was Hadley Park, or it was
Right.
the games at Pearl Cone or White's Creek, or it was
Yeah.
just the community that I know that I I am, kind of deeply connected to. You gotta be able to speak that language too. and
Right. And
so
talk about the challenge of that. Like, because one, there's a perception on both sides. There's a
For
perception that
sure.
because you are this black kid coming from a different environment, that your life is this type of way. But then even going back to your home, as you stated it, like there's a perception of, oh, you get to spend your days over here in this very prestigious institution. Like there's some assumptions and stereotypes made about that. Were there any challenges when you with you navigating living in that life, in that duality?
Oh, I mean, I never said I went to MBA with a clear voice. I mumbled it all. I
Uh-huh.
mean, even through college, mumbled it like I don't want anybody to. And there is the it's as a black student, it isn't a badge of honor
Yeah,
because you know the history of it. It's like you
right.
know it, everybody else knows it. People kind of know what the systems of whiteness have done to the world, and it's kind of a beacon of that, and that's not
Yeah.
it, and that's not kind of pointing a finger at. I say that in the same way that I say that I'm tall. I'm 6'8". I'm just
Yeah,
tall. Like NBA just is like it's not an indictment of you.
right.
It's just if any of us are honestly looking at what what's
That's
going
it.
on, that's kind of what's going on. So
Yeah.
so it's hard to be a black person and be, you know, proud of that because you kind of know what it's done. Even if it's done some great things for you personally, you know that it's done some really hard things in the community to get to the place where it is, and that's the corrective action that has to happen.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah. That's the
exactly.
epitome of America. Like we've become this powerful country because it did some things that at the time probably were okay and appropriate, but made it an unfair advantage to be a powerful financial source, a powerful source in social influence and everything like that. So and you reminded me of something about that video of me speaking at NBA. It was actually taken down. And
I
so
remember that.
that
Yeah,
that like hurt. I'm not gonna lie, because
yeah.
I was talking about how hard it was to um one, just be up there and give that talk, but the experience of feeling excluded, and to have a video that other students, other former students had come through and given their testimony, given their talks, very much uplifting and praising all the work, which rightfully so, it does a lot of good stuff in people's lives. But mine was deemed controversial and taken down. And so that just added to the exclusion, it added to this
Hmm.
feelings of resentment toward the school. And I kind of like wish that uh it that hadn't been the reality, that it was still up, that both truths were available for people to witness. And so but I want to transition a little bit and talk about, so you graduated from this prestigious institution, an MBA, private school, and then you went to college. You studied, what'd you study in college? And yeah.
Yeah, I studied math first, so I went to Belmont University, also in Nashville. Math was the major I declared, but I was on a basketball scholarship, and I wasn't super passionate about one path or another, but math is
Okay.
what I was good at.
Yeah.
So majored
Wow.
in math and had a good experience, especially initially, at Belmont. I ran into some mental health struggles, was diagnosed bipolar disorder like late into my sophomore year, maybe early junior year.
Okay.
And so after my third year, I played 3 years there and then transferred. Once I had, I think probably, I don't remember if it was my first. I think it was my first like diagnosable manic episode where I had to be hospitalized and
Okay.
went through the whole.
How I think there's a misconception around bipolar disorder, and like I think even as a younger version of me, which I see as triggers from my PTSD, I would, there'd be a mood shift instantly.
Yeah,
Talk about what bipolar disorder means in your life and what that has looked like, and what a manic episode versus depressed episode looks like.
yeah, yeah, and I think probably the biggest misconception is that it's a quick switch
Yeah.
when it really isn't. Where it's like, at least for me, you might be in a state of mild depression for a number of months, and that was probably going on in high school. I'm sure that was
Mm-hmm.
going on in college. It was going on long before it was like diagnosable, really, and
Mm-hmm.
it could just. It doesn't necessarily have to be suicidal or anything to that extreme. It could just be sleeping a lot, lack of motivation. yeah, there's kind of more mild, and then the manic episodes also tend to come on kind of slowly. At least for me, where there might be periods where I didn't need much sleep and I had a lot of energy, just natural energy, not
Mm,
nothing artificial, no drugs or anything, just natural energy. Could be exacerbated by drug use or alcohol for
for
sure, but
sure.
and then as that energy comes, ideas might start showing up where you know hyper creative. No idea feels like a bad idea, and so
Mm,
executing a lot of those ideas, even being really can be really charismatic and really likable in that sort of early mania before it tips into full blown mania where it almost is that's what observers would see as like, okay, this person's a little bit off the rails now.
yeah.
Not
Yeah.
necessarily dangerous,
Yeah.
just they're like speeding at this point.
Uh-huh.
And then that period is usually when something negative could happen,
Something
and then you'd
happened.
have you'd have to you'd have to get yeah, you might
I
spend a whole bunch of money, or you might just give away. It's like people who've done everything from buying a car to giving a car away.
yeah.
So done
Yeah.
anything from like throwing a party with yeah, just all kinds of yeah, just any idea that felt like a good idea might be
Wasn't it?
executed really quickly,
Gotcha.
and then that would typically could last until a natural crash happened or until you're hospitalized and you have to take medication to bring you
Okay.
back down. And then
Okay.
once you're back down to an even level, at least my experience was it was kind of hard to get to an even level. It usually would be like a little bit, you would feel like you're almost depressed because you've been on this sort of energy
Mm.
high. And
Mhm.
so
I g
being even would feel kind of down.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard bipolar disorder described in such detail. So I mean, I think a
Hmm.
lot of people learn from what you just said. Like that is very impactful. And so with that, so you were going through school, you found out that you were diagnosed, and then you continued and transferred to Tennessee State
Yeah.
University.
Well, I transferred to MTSU.
MT?
And
Okay.
because I was still looking at playing one more, playing out my eligibility at
Okay.
MTSU. That didn't end up working out, but at the time I was considering trying to continue to play sports, and balance out the diagnosis. And a big part of not being mentally healthy is it really affects athletics, because if you're not, I mean, think about any athlete that isn't
Mhm.
confident, and you're
Yeah.
not going to be very confident while you're depressed,
Right, right.
but you'll be extra confident with mania. And so, I
You
mean, I had
drunken on folks,
games
huh?
where I was like, I wasn't manic enough to be off the rails, but
Mm,
I had the energy enough to be like teetering. And so I might have a really good game, but I might curse at the coach from the court.
yeah, yeah.
I might do something like
It's
something that
like
was a little like it's like in some ways it's harnessed okay, but in a lot of ways it's not yeah, it's not gonna fit with with what is acceptable
gotcha.
in society. And
Yeah, yeah.
so yeah, so after going to MTSU, ended up just leaving there, worked in restaurants for a number of years, and had some legal trouble in and out even from those earlier
Mhm.
years. But once I got to be about 25, I'd had my third mental health I had my third manic episode that I had to be hospitalized for. And
Okay.
I finally like stayed on the medication,
Gotcha,
quit
yeah.
drinking, quit using drugs altogether. And part of it was also that alcohol would kick up, not even just alcohol or drugs, and it all
Yep.
depends on what you, but any of that could kind of kick you into a little more of a um, little more mania. So once I'd had that third episode, and this is January of 2006, I yeah, I quit drinking, using drugs. I still don't drink to this day, and a lot of people like some people know the
Yeah.
whole story of why, and some people are just like, I don't know, he just never does.
Right.
But yeah, from '06 to now, it's 2023. Hadn't drank, smoked weed,
Wow.
any drugs or alcohol. Just
Yeah.
and it hasn't really been as much the addiction side of it as learning that if I'm going to stay balanced and
Yep.
stay on this medication and keep life sort of moving in in a healthy way, I just can't do it. It's like
Yeah.
being allergic to something. It's like
Because all those
I
things
can't
affect
do it.
the chemistry in your brain. Like it's
They
being
do.
affected, whether
They
whether
do.
you have a disorder like bipolar disorder or you don't, it's still having an impact on your brain. Not I've noticed because in the last coming up on yeah, the end of this month will be 11 months of no alcohol for me.
Yeah.
And I noticed so much, mental clarity and energy and creativity because, that I just eliminated that substance in my body. And so I can only imagine that plus being interacting with the medicine that you are taking and all of that, how it
Yeah.
can affect you. So no, kudos to you, bro, for being able to, that's a long time. And I know social pressures and peer pressures is there, but once people know like you and like you're great without it, like it's just like, come on, let's
Yeah.
ride. So
For
yeah.
sure, for sure. And I think that's another thing is getting to the point where you just get comfortable enough in your own
Yep.
skin. And I
Yep.
mean, being in environments that we were in as younger people, I mean, it's hard to get comfortable in your own skin because there's
Yeah.
so much that's not really celebrated about you being who you really are.
True.
It's like you go into those environments and you put on this whole uniform, and it's not just your
Yes.
clothes. It's the
Oof.
way it's everything is a uniform.
Everything.
Um,
Everything. Which is
and
exhausting as hell.
it's exhausting.
Oof.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge benefit that, you know, students can bring to a space like MBA, because the people that are there that are of that community, they're putting on the uniform too. It's like when I really get into it with friends from Belmead and from friends that are like generations deep in it, they're just as sick of it as I am.
Yeah. For
they're like,
real.
this ain't really me either,
For real. Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think that's a huge like benefit that spaces that start to figure out that some of that tradition isn't even serving the people that it was made for. You
Right.
know,
Right. And I think this generation is really fed up with status quo. Like
for
our
sure.
generation, no matter what background you have, is wanting change in some way, shape, form, or
Yeah,
fashion. So yeah, I think that's real. That's a great point that you point out. What's up, Vulnerability Muscle fam? We've got an amazing sponsor to talk about today, and it's a product that has truly made a difference in my life. Calm and Go. Now, I only bring products that I believe in, and this is one that has been a game changer for me. Whenever I feel stressed, whenever I feel like things are just piling up and the anxiety is really cranking up, I turn to my Calm and Go device. This is it right here. This thing is literally a game changer, and I was skeptical about it at first, but what makes this thing stand out? It combines three scientifically proven methods to reducing anxiety. First, there's grounding technique, multisensory stimulation that really helps you stay present. So you have the feel of it, there's a vibration factor, there's lights, there's also smell. Then there's the scented element, tapping into the power of aromatherapy. But here's the kicker, and what really sets Calm and Go apart is personalized breathing regulation. It's like having your own breathing coach in your pocket, in your hand. And so I use this when I'm gearing up for podcasts, when I'm starting my day, when I'm calming down and chilling out at the end of my day. It has been an absolute game changer. I love Calm and Go because it's not a one size fit all solution. It's tailored to me, my body, my unique stress triggers. The impact it has on my daily life is undeniable. Now, I want you to experience the calm that Calm and Go can bring to your life. Head over to callmego.com and use the code Reggie444 at checkout for a fantastic $30 off. Trust me, this is an investment in your well being that you won't regret. Visit callmego.com, use the code Reggie444 at checkout, and let Calmigo help you find calm in the storm. I want to talk about art because that's a huge part of your life, and we see some
for
artwork
sure.
in the
Yeah,
background. You got art
for
all over
sure.
the
There's it's
over the
it's
spot.
everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
everywhere.
big
Look at
big
that.
sister up there. So
Oh
yeah,
man, that's beautiful. Tell
yeah.
so you have a show 15, right? 15 is the name of the show. What is the significant
It
around
is. I
15?
gotta,
Uh-oh.
I gotta plug that real quick
And
too.
we
I
got a
know
nice
if you
book right
don't
there.
if you don't have it, I think you can go ahead and pick that up.
PTSD, perseverance through severe dysfunction.
PTSD.
I like it. I
Yes.
like it. I saw it up
Yeah.
there. I always try to see if I can see that white on black on people's shelves, bro.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But tell me, so 15 is the name of the show. And what does that represent for you? And what was the significance around naming it? 15?
Yeah, it was about a 15-year prison sentence.
Wow.
So in 2008, I was arrested on a drug possession charge that carried a 15-year sentence.
Oof.
And so I did 3.5 of those years and had to do the rest on parole. And in April of this year, April of 2023, I got off parole and
Congrats.
decided to, yeah, it was definitely, man, it's, yeah, quite a journey. But in getting off, I decided to sort of mark that time with an exhibit because that's been the most kind of the most influential and healing thing in my life has been art making. Like as much as medication, not drinking and using, spirituality, all of the stuff that has kind of allowed me to not have a manic episode for
Hmm.
15 plus years, 17 out. Art making has been the most important and consistent kind of medicine. And
Wow.
I wanted to kind of share that story of of yeah, moving through that sentence and how art, yeah, tell that story through a body of work, through a body of
Yeah.
pieces. Yeah.
Let's back up. Let's back up because I hear this is because it's different than what you would expect from both parents in the home, nurturing home
Hmm.
coming up, private school education,
For sure.
student athlete and all that, and then you end up in prison for drug. How did you go from there to being in prison for a drug
Yeah.
charge?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it's sort of connected. I mean, for one, I did work in restaurants for, after I left MTSU, I was just kind of working in restaurants, and there was a lot of drugs and alcohol in that environment. But there was also a lot of drugs and alcohol in private schools. And
Hmm. Yeah,
so I mean,
sure.
my introduction to, the first drug dealers I knew were, they were in Green Hills, and they were connected to these schools.
Yep.
They were kind of connected to. Um, and the first time that I really started seeing drugs was 13, 14, 15
Yeah.
in, and so it wasn't foreign to me to see them, or even to do them a little bit.
Hmm.
But I think when I got to a stage of life where I felt like the momentum of my potential wasn't matching the momentum of where I was, I was like,
Wow.
I'm gonna. I couldn't really at that point. I couldn't see a reason not to, as far as like selling drugs in that stretch of life, because I was,
Elaborate on that phrase. Your momentum of potential wasn't matching where you were. What do you
yeah.
mean by that?
Yeah, I think, and that's something that I've kind of been reflecting a lot on lately, of why people do anything that someone might say is like a shortcut. And I think it's a lot of it has to do with the place that you are in society doesn't seem to line up with who you are and know
Hmm.
you're capable of. It's like, but you don't know the route. It's like
Right.
now I know that, making artwork was kind of the route to get to the place that I felt like I I don't want to say deserved, but that I deserve. We'll just say deserve for lack of other word, but the place that I could be. And some people might see that through medicine. Some people might see that through getting into their parents' business. Whatever the thing is. But I think Black people, more than a lot of people in, especially in the United States, have put in enough to be in a different position than we're in.
Yeah.
And so you get to 17 to 25 and you look around and you're like, we built all this shit. Like, why don't we have any of it?
True.
And so all like the moral codes of whatever of like, it's like, no, how do we get to the place that we think we should be at when there isn't really a clear path? And even coming
Mm,
from a private school and coming from, from parents that had resources, I still didn't really see a path of, my own autonomy. And I saw that as as kind of a way of like, I'm in an environment where so many of these people are doing drugs, and
mhm.
some of them ask me if I know where to find them, even though I don't do them. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like, well, I do, and I've done them all enough to kind of, you know, know the know the risk. And I reflect a little bit about on the era that we're in now. It's like that's kind of pre opioid era,
Mhm.
so people weren't like like dying on the on the drugs they were
Right.
doing. I mean, not that they weren't giving people a lot of trouble, because obviously I quit using because they gave
Yeah.
me some trouble,
Right.
but it all felt like it all felt smaller than I think than it was, and it
Mhm.
also felt smaller than the amount of time, and even in the direct community that I was connected to, where I knew a lot of people that got drug charges from the environments that we were in high school, and none of them did any time. And I should
Mhm.
have paid better. I
Yep.
should have paid better attention to the difference between me and the ones that. But yeah,
Yeah.
even in my specific case, the only people that did time was me and then the Puerto Rican guy. He got
Wow.
11, I got 15. There was a white guy on the paperwork who got probation.
Wow.
I knew some other guys that they got. I won't dig super deep into details
Right.
because of people that you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But there was a
I know,
difference. There was a
but
clear
there was a
difference.
there was a clear difference, and it really the only reason that I wouldn't is because I don't I don't wish for anybody to get a ton of time
Mhm.
for really for anything,
Anything.
but
True.
especially yeah, I wouldn't have wished that on my peers
Right.
either. I mean, I'm glad that they figured it out, got a job, and never had to go sit in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But on an equality side of it, I know that if I had my exact same background as a white person, I guarantee I would not
Yeah.
have gotten that time.
I
My
I,
dad's
I
a,
would
my dad is
agree.
a lawyer in Nashville. My
Yeah.
dad is knew the judge that I got the time from. He
Wow.
knew like he's as close to the community. I mean, he's partner in a firm, as close to the community that I was facing as a parent could be.
Mhm.
I mean, he was, except he was a black parent.
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
yeah. So and I kind of almost cautioned to use like all of my own circumstances, but they make it so clear
Yeah.
what race plays into it. And
Yep.
and I know that when a judge is sitting in front of a white defendant, they see a kid that could possibly be their son. And
Yep.
when they're looking at me, they see someone who they've already been programmed to see as a criminal. Since I was
Exactly.
5 years old,
Exactly.
since
Yeah.
since my mom was going into those schools saying you're not gonna, they already have that as a it's predisposed to it.
It's something that impacts us all, right? Like even like you were coming home as a 5-year old, and if you didn't have that reinforcement from your mom saying you're not worse than these, you're not lesser than, then maybe you would have started to internalize, and to a point you did. We all do
For sure.
internalize that inferiority, and so you're right. A judge, a teacher, a whomever it may be, has this implicit bias when they look at people who look like you, and being a 6'13" dude, tall as can be,
Yeah.
like there's
Yeah,
there's stereotypes and stigmas that come along with that, right?
for sure.
But I was listening to an interview that you did not too long ago, and you talked about the words of somebody who came into your cell when you were sleeping. You wanted to sleep. You wanted to sleep a
Hmm.
lot of that time away. You wanted to
I
sleep a lot of
sure
that
did.
time away.
I was trying to sleep about every 15 year, every
Oh
day.
man, and
Yeah.
like I can only imagine. But what was the word or the encouragement that got you out of bed?
Yeah, a buddy, which is something else that I think can never be like stated enough, how many like truly just good-hearted, genuine compassion people that there are in prison right
Yeah.
now. Like
Yes.
right now as we're speaking, there is thousands and thousands and thousands of people that would do anything for you and that could positively impact this society
Mm-hmm.
outside just like they are inside. But yeah, a guy just came and he banged on my bunk and said, you can't sleep your time away, six. And they call
Wow.
me 6'9" because I'm in that range of height. So he said, you
Mm-hmm.
can't sleep your time away. And that was him kind of saying, all right, get up, get out of the cell, go live life, go and not even go live life, come live life. It's like,
Wow.
I know that you're trying to sleep this time away because you so hate what's going on out here, but this is your community, and
Yeah.
we're willing to we're all helping each other through this. We
It's
all hate some
beautiful.
part of this, and there really were some that happened every single day with someone. Somebody went through
Wow.
something every day that somebody else pulled
And you
them
don't hear
through.
those stories. You don't hear those stories about prison. You hear about, oh, I saw somebody get carried out on a stretcher. I saw this. I saw that. You don't
Yeah,
hear those stories often of the community, and I think that
for
speaks so
sure,
highly of getting through tough times is the power of community. The
absolutely.
people are going to help you through that. So who were some of those other people that got you through the 3.5 years that you did spend, or when you were thinking about it earlier, those 15 years that you may have had to spend?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a long list. One is a common friend of ours, Big Fridge. Calvin Bryant,
Fridge,
who
let's
he's
go.
gotten to, yeah, he's gotten to, come home and restart his life that was already going on such a great track before his charge. But I mean, he was one. But there was a lot. There were a lot of guys. There were a lot that and I mean, even some of the stereotypes that that gang affiliations have on the outside world, where and
Mhm.
even inside, where it's like people really want to be quick to condemn gangs when and I'm not saying that all gang activity is positive or whatever. I'm really not I'm not speaking on it, period. Like,
Yeah,
which is something else
right.
that I kind of, but I would say that the two times that I was incarcerated, once was here and once was in Mississippi on a shorter amount of time,
Woo!
but it was, yeah, I thought I was in Memphis. I actually was across the border in Mississippi, and but both times, people that were at least affiliated, the people were affiliated, were people that really maintained the the pulse of the institution,
Mm,
and as many things as they may have as people would think that they caused negatively, they also caused positively,
yeah,
we're able to be the gatekeepers of the community. The same reason that there were Polish gangsters and
yeah,
Italian gangsters and Irish gangsters,
right.
New York in the 30s, 40s, all that. Like, the whole purpose of that was being in a place where the systems aren't going to protect the community.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so these affiliations popped up as ways to make that happen. And I'm saying
Mhm.
that's the way that I experienced it. I'm not saying that is that none of this is
Right,
hard and true for every situation, but I
but your
think it's
experience, and I think your experience talks to kind of the origin story of gangs. When you think about the Crips and the Bloods in California being formed, it wasn't the same perception that we have on gangs today. It was
for
like they
sure,
they were there protecting community. They were there providing for people who didn't have things. And over time, right, through social influences, through social pressures, and maybe some of the same things that you had in mind about the momentum not keeping up, or the potential not being where you are, saying, hey, I can get some money out here. Hey, somebody just flew some stuff in on a plane. Let's add this component to it to
for
provide for our
sure,
people. And then you start to see this disconnect. Oh, this person is taking money out of my pocket and they're over here on this street. We're gonna clash about that. Right. And I
for
think there are a
sure.
lot of social pressures when it comes to that. So I love that that was your experience, because again, like, you just don't hear that type of talk about gangs or about prison at all. But this seems like a really tight knit community.
Yeah, and I also just think that anyone that is in everyone has a circle. Like, we had
Right.
teammates. Like, the
Yeah.
reason why we never were, or I can't say about you personally, but the reason that I like my circle was always like my teammates. Some people have fraternities, some people have sororities, some
Right.
people have church members. It's like every space there's going to be a group of people that is their brother and sisterhood or
Hmm.
community, and I think that that's something that people don't really understand, that that's all that is, that's all
Yeah.
that these affiliations are trying to, are not even trying, that they are representing, is that this is our group, and
Right.
and
Right.
really the negativity never really happens to people that are outside of the group. It's like,
Right.
I was never in anything because I wasn't in anything. So I mean,
Right.
it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, I was sort of on I was sort of on the side, like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
stuff that actually happens between each other,
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
more than anything.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So, in your show 15, you have a ton of different artwork that it just hit me on a personal level, and I think that's part of your ability when you do make your art is you touch people on a personal level, whether it's something that they've experienced directly or not. It helps them think about some of those things in their life. And one of the things I just wanted to point out was that you had several letters that
for
have been written,
sure,
yeah, between you and your partner,
for
Tara.
sure.
Shout out to Tara.
Yes, Tara
Yeah.
Booker.
So yeah, letters between you and Tara, and it brought me back because just I used to get letters from my dad while he was in prison. I used to write him letters and things, and it just like
Yeah,
seeing, it addressed to a facility and just thinking like there's so much power behind it. I think like just the letter alone could have been artwork, but you put some art around your own art around it, which I thought was beautiful. But I want to talk about the big piece, this black bird.
for
This black bird.
sure.
Can you describe that for people who may be listening? What the image of this large piece of work is?
Yeah, that is a life-size portrait of me in my cell. So
Mm,
I reconstructed my cell basically did a diorama like about a shoebox size just to get all the shadows. But of course, I knew exactly where everything was in there. I'd been looking at it for a long time. So
yeah.
so yeah, so I reconstructed that and then painted 8 by 8 foot piece of me sitting there holding a letter, which likely would have been a letter from, or well, probably from Tara, really, because that was kind of the night, ritual. Is if you get any mail, you go in your cell, read the letter. But it's almost like I was looking up as if someone was standing at the door of the cell, and I kind of intentionally made my expression pretty flat.
Mhm,
Not Didn't really want it to show. I wanted there to be enough interpretation where it wasn't necessarily joy, it wasn't necessarily anger or whatever. It's just acknowledging that someone was in the presence
mhm.
of that room. And yeah, I thought it was really important just to let people understand what it looked like to walk into somebody's cell because
Yeah.
so many people wouldn't, and people that were viewing that artwork would see me in a pretty different light at this stage of life, even though it's not that far away. I mean, that was 10 years ago when I was in there. So I wanted it to really feel like you were walking into the cell, and there were pictures of me and my grandmother, pictures of Tara that were all kind of painted into the
Mhm.
room. This book, Man's Search for Meaning, which
Yes.
if it's not
Viktor
up there,
Frankl,
it's somewhere close by. But yeah, that book was painted into the cell.
which is
My
a
clothes
powerful
kind of
book. Powerful book. Man, and it reminds me of your attachment to another symbol or image in the painting of the black bird. Right? You had of do you wanna speak to that? And I don't know if you have time or have it in front of you or remember it, but the poem that you wrote along with that blackbird, because the the parallel that I see between the bird and Viktor Frankl's book, Search for Meaning, is just this some symbol of hope, right? Having hope to get through whatever the hardship is. And if you don't know Viktor Frankl, he was a Holocaust survivor, and so he talks about certain things that helped him. The search for meaning is the name of the man's search for meaning is the name of the book, and so yeah, talk about the black bird and what it did for you.
yeah. Well, it is it a symbol that was realistic. I mean, it showed up in my window really consistently um, every day for a good part of at least the seasons when it could. I'm not sure what parts of the winter that it may not have, but there was a stretch where it was there every single day.
Mm,
And I wrote a poem about the interaction with me and the bird and how I sort of kind of started going away with it as it would leave, and then it
mhm.
would continue to come back, and I would go away. But yeah, definitely, I will definitely
I would
share
love
that
to hear it,
poem.
and I'm sure.
Yeah, and I'll share the piece with you too, and we can always post that somewhere or
Absolutely, yeah,
have that piece so it can be seen.
sweet.
But this black bird, so this was written in 2012 at Charles Bass Correctional Complex. This black bird. This black bird lands on my window. The same bird every morning. I guess it's the same. All I've seen is its shadow. But it says hello every day, every morning. I fly away with my little black friend. Every day, every morning. My mind on its back, free on its wings. Though I only see it through bars, we meet at the screen. It visits me every morning, every day. It brings me hope. It feeds my dreams. They're only bars. They're only screens. It's only tears. It's only screams. And to be born, we need these things. It brings me hope. It feeds my dreams. They're only bars. They're only screens. It's only tears. It's only screams. And to be born, we need these things. So for now, I guess I'm free. My little black friend, it visits me every morning, every day.
God,
Yeah.
bro, chills, man. I got chills from that just because, man, I can't like I've not sat in a prison cell, but like you can, man, if you look at the image and then put those words to it, I think you feel so much of the inside of what was going on in your head. And I think it speaks to your inner strength of having that courage to, I mean, you dissociate, right? And become fly away with this bird, but
Hmm.
it kept you going through a very
Yeah.
difficult time. And I think that's so powerful. And I mean, like literally, I'm almost speechless because like these chills, man. It's so powerful, bro. You do a fantastic job of expressing yourself artistically, like the creativity through your art. And now I know you're a poet, so now we got so much coming out of you from art. Yeah, I think this might be the last question, but just talk about like the the connection between expressing yourself through your artwork and that being a form of your vulnerability.
Yeah. The artists that I've always been the most inspired by were the ones that I felt were the most honest, and you can't be honest without being vulnerable. It's
Mm,
like if you tell the truth about, it's like the only reason that poem, like, I mean, I almost come to tears every time I read it, and it's because like it captured a moment that was so true. It's like it was the moment that I found out that even in prison I could be free, and freedom is so valuable to me. And
mm,
so being able to kind of find that and then find it through the screen and tears and screams, and it's like it was a really hard way to find out the way to be free. But I wasn't free as a drug dealer with a lot of money. I wasn't free as a college basketball player with a lot of potential. There were all these other times that things looked better, and finding it in that moment allowed me to have this moment.
yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, I think that finding a way to get to the core of what's going on with you is going to be vulnerable. Like there's
Mhm.
kind of no way to get to the truth of who you are without exposing yourself. And I think even people that have a hard time doing it in life, um, which I often do, you know,
Yeah.
art is a place that I feel responsible to the work. It's like I can't I can't lie about this. And
Yeah.
so in telling the truth about that, everything else comes to fruition. We talked about Tara and our relationship, which has had so many different iterations, but partly in making this body of work was getting into some of those spaces and really, yeah, really kind of opening that side of like the things that have been really, really dear to me and really, really important and really hard to admit, like needing somebody,
Yeah.
like saying like, man, this person really like pulled me through this thing.
Yes.
I mean, and does consistently. So
It's
yeah, I mean,
beautiful.
all of those, yeah, I think the things that I would likely shy away from in just my, my ego and my person. I kind of have to get into through artwork because I don't want to let that down,
Yeah.
and so yeah.
Man, you I mean, I just gotta let that let the beat breathe a little bit because
Yeah.
that's powerful. I'm gonna express something to you that I don't know how it'll make other people feel, but I don't really care. But like I said this to a friend the other day. Like I don't like truly like 99% of the people that I know just because of my experience and my trauma and things like that. So I don't truly like a lot of people. And but I love and respect people, right, for who they are and being humans. And but you're one of those people that I genuinely like and I love. And I'm happy that our paths are crossed. And it means the world to call you a friend, bro, for real. And I just wanted to express that. Like you that's you mean a lot to me, bro.
Man, I so appreciate that. It doesn't fall on deaf ears, and I feel 100% the same. I feel
Absolutely.
100% the same. Yeah, when I reached out at first, kind of hearing you. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what people gravitate to you because you are really really honest. There's there isn't a it's not gamesmanship. It's not promotion. It's a real, like, you're kind of, as Dave Chappelle said about Richard Pryor, he was throwing himself against the world, and the world, kind of had to love that, even though they probably wouldn't do it. It's
Right.
like, and I think that's the thing that is, special about anyone that pursues something that people will get behind, because they might know, like, I wouldn't risk myself in that way, but I love that he's doing it, or that she's doing it, and I'm behind
Right.
that person for, being, being willing. So
Definitely.
yeah, I mean, this is an important conversation, and I'm grateful that we're having it. It's definitely one of those that I feel like, man, we might have to have a part two.
That's what
We
I'm
just
thinking,
scratched the
bro.
surface.
That's what I'm thinking. Man, so I got a couple of rapid response questions that I want you to answer and then we'll wrap this up. First thing that comes to mind. No need to think too hard on it, okay? What comes to mind when you hear the word vulnerability?
Pain.
Mm. If you could have a conversation with anyone, living or dead, who would it be?
Or grandmother, grandka.
Grandmothers are special, bro. Yeah. What is one of your favorite childhood memories?
There was a Christmas that me and my sister both got exactly the thing that we wanted. And as we were opening it, we looked up and realized it was snowing. It was like out of a movie.
Ooh.
We're like, it's
Oh
snowing. Yeah.
man.
This is
Yes.
this is Mad this is Madison, Tennessee, back in the day.
Ooh.
Probably 1988 or so.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. What is a book or movie that everyone should read or watch?
Two books. One, Between the World and Me,
Mm.
Ta-Nehisi Coates. Two, PTSD, Perseverance Through Severe Dysfunction, Reggie D. Ford.
Man, to be mentioned alongside that book, that means a lot. What is one thing you do to relax when you're feeling stressed? I think I might know the answer. I don't want to be too presumptuous.
It's paint. It's
Yes.
paint. Same thing I do for work.
Yes. That's what's up. And last question. What is the number one podcast you've ever experienced?
Embracing Vulnerability with Reggie D. Ford. Love that I'm here.
Hey, I love that you're here as well, bro. How can people contact you, get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
The easiest is Instagram, Omari Booker. Also website Omari Booker, but Instagram is a great way to send a message and shoot you to any of the other stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'll include that in the show notes. But Omari, with all the things that you could be doing and all the places that you could be, I appreciate you being here with me, embracing vulnerability.
Man, no place I'd rather be. I appreciate you.
Thank you for joining us for another powerful episode of Vulnerability Muscle. I hope you found inspiration and valuable insights that resonate with you. If you're enjoying this journey of self discovery and empowerment, there are a few ways you can support the podcast. First, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. If you've been moved by our conversations and the mission of redefining vulnerability, please consider leaving a review. Your feedback not only motivates us, but also helps others discover the podcast. Share your thoughts on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in. And don't forget to spread the word. Follow us on Instagram at Vulnerability Muscle for updates, and you can connect with me personally at Reggie D Ford on all platforms. Visit vulnerabilitymuscle.com for additional resources and upcoming episodes. And remember, embracing vulnerability is strength. Thanks for being a part of the journey. Until next time, stay empowered, stay vulnerable, and keep flexing that vulnerability muscle.